It's looking good. Right, shall we start? So we'll start with item 1 on the agenda. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absences and substitutions. So as far as I'm aware, it's just Councillor Bob Davis who's here this evening. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Livings.
Old Harlow's ward councillor, please. Yes, thank you.
Procurement interest in item 8 as the county councillor.
Okay, thank you. I've also got non-pecuniary in item 8 as the ward councillor for that ward. Councillor Garnett.
Item 7, ward councillor, and it's in my Essex County Council division, and item 10 is my Essex County Council division, non-pecuniary.
Thank you. Councillor Hardware.
Bill, not the highest, number 10 is the Netswell ward.
Councillor Watson. Councillor Hardware.
Item 8 in my county council division.
Thank you. Right. That's it for declarations. Minutes.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry,
I thought we established last time that this is not necessary 2 meetings ago.
So I think the guidance is it's not, but if councillors wish to do it, they can. But yes, the guidance is it's not required.
Necessary.
Yes.
So it's pretty pointless doing this.
Item 3 on the agenda, which is the minutes which appear in the supplementary, which was distributed earlier, which is supplementary agenda item 2 on your iPads. Are they agreed? Excellent. Any matters arising from them? No. Excellent. Item 5, written questions. We have none. Item 6, the procedure for consideration of planning applications. So the procedure is we will start with the planning officer presenting the report. We then have comments from members of the public who have registered to speak at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. This can either be in person via Zoom or can be written with a maximum of 450 words. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. We then follow that with comments from the applicant or agent. Again, the applicant or agent is limited to 3 minutes. We'll then follow with councillors' questions and clarifications, which officers will respond to, and then councillors will move to a debate and make a decision on each application. So if we can move to item 3A, which is the next application that we'll be looking at. If Patricia, you could present this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Alex, thank you. As you can see from the screen in front of you, the application is for reserved matters following the approval in 2012 of the phase 2 of Newhall. The proposal is for reserved matters which does not include access, because that was determined at the outline stage. It does include appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. Thank you. Next slide, please, Alex.
Doesn't appear to be working, Alex. That's it.
Is that working?
It is. Next slide.
Same things.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Alex. This is a view over the part of Newhall Neighbourhood. You will have seen this before because it's quite a good way of identifying where the development is going ahead. Most of the development, and including this site, is off to the far sort of eastern side of the picture. If we could have the next slide, Alex, I can identify exactly where this development is. As you can see, this is now getting to the end of the Newhall development. This is part of CP3, which has been split up into 3 areas. A is the southernmost part with B and C above. We are or have already received those applications, so they are with us but not yet determined. This application came forward first, and as you can see, it's also located on the easternmost part of the site. Thank you, Alex. The CP3 area is shown dotted in blue on this plan, although it's not included within the application. The red-lined area is the application site itself. This shows that the Hall Road, if you can see the white line going to the right-hand side, actually goes through the site at the moment. That will obviously be replaced by housing in due course if this application is approved. This shows in a little bit more detail than the last slightly fuzzy slide. It shows where there has been development already. Members will recall that a recent application for Sector 5 was approved. That is directly to the south of the southeasternmost corner of this site, so just below that crescent and towards the east. So that's been approved as well. If we could have the next slide, please. The reason for considering the whole of the CP3 area at once is that it has been conceptualised on the basis that it forms part of a larger area, the CP3A site. Alex, if you could just identify that as sort of the 3 blocks on the right-hand side of that dot below the green line. So that comes in as part of the conceptualisation for the whole of the CP3 area. Could I have the next slide? I'm going to go into detail on that at the moment. This slide shows the layout of the proposed houses and the roads internal in terms of layout for the scheme. So there will be a crossroads. Part of the conceptualisation is to provide way marking within the site, and in this case is with red brick, which we'll see it in a few more slides, and also a junction point at the northwestern corner of the site. Next slide, please. As you can see from this slide, which is slightly different orientation, we're looking from the west at this point. There are larger buildings towards the western part of the site. That is towards the end of High Chase, and smaller buildings around the site, although they do vary in height from 2 to 2.5 to 3 story across the site. But there are 2 story going towards the eastern edge, which is open and wooded in places. The proposed mix of housing is 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. They're located towards the western side in those 3 story blocks mainly. And then there are also 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom and 4 bedroom houses dotted throughout the site, although there are 2 long terraces of 4 bedroom properties. I've indicated in the report that there are a certain number of house types. There are quite a variety here, although they are to a degree on a theme. They are located so that the character of the area is fairly mixed, as you can see from this slide. This is an example of one of the street scenes. The 3 story buildings at the bottom are the ones that are on the western side of the site, and that then runs along across the top. I think you can see that in the little key on the side, with the 3 story buildings at the junction points. This is within the site at the crossroads. They are mainly 2 story. Again, the red brick does identify junctions. wayfinding purposes. Thank you, Alex. This is the block to the west, but the southern, I think the northern block of the two. Although it appears to be one single flat-fronted building, there is actually a break in the middle, so that it is slightly set in at that point to add a little feature to that building. And the next slide shows one of the fogs, which are the flats above garages, which are located mainly in the middle of the site. As you can see from the external materials palette, this draws from the palette that was agreed for the whole of the Newhall site. In this case, I don't think they've put a red or a blue door in, which we did have previously, but they've gone for the muted tones, but included a black, red and yellow brick with slate and clay tiles. Just a view of the tenure. It isn't, as I've indicated in the report, pepper potted throughout the site, but it is reasonable that it is located on the main axis in the 2 3-story blocks, and there are houses there shown in the middle. Just a couple of photos of the site. I'm afraid there aren't very many of these, but this is along the eastern edge. And if you look to the western side of this photo to the left, that is part of the Hall Road at the moment, but the site basically sort of wraps around, and I think you can just see one of the existing houses on the corner there. Whilst this isn't directly adjacent to 3A, it is to the west of the CP3 area, and it is just an indication of the amount of greenery that there is surrounding the site. This is a picture of the part of High Chase. And if you look right at the end, right in the middle, that is the start of the application site. This also clearly identifies the style of dwellings that are in this part of the Newhall neighbourhood. And this last slide is a CGI of the 3-story building and the type and colour of the materials that will be proposed. In terms of the affordable housing, there would be 15%, which is what we would normally expect on Newhall and is in line with the legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, where have you gone? Okay, we have, where's it gone? We have no speakers on this, so if I could call Liz, obviously Liz, you'll have 3 minutes to put your case.
Thank you, Chair. I don't propose to say too much. I think the officer's report mostly covers it, and obviously Patricia's presentation. But as always, we're here to offer any additional support in terms of responding to questions that members may have on the scheme and how the scheme's evolving. So I'm quite happy to answer anything. If not, I shall disappear.
Thank you very much, Liz. We have no other speakers, members. Any questions? Councillor Garnett. Unmute yourself, Councillor Garnett.
I'm trying.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I'm Elizabeth. I'm Chair. Perhaps you can indulge me in this one. Newhall Way, which leads, I assume, up to this development. Is that right? I'm concerned. I'm saying, please bear with me. Is that when it joins Old London Road, there is no controlled crossing point for people to get from phase 1 across down Old London Road. Am I making sense? Is there anything? I thought we talked about this some time ago about putting in some sort of crossing point for the children.
So you're talking about between the enterprise zone to the district centre?
No, on your site, you know, the countryside, you've got where the table is. You know, the new crossroads.
On 3A?
Yeah, the new,
Yeah.
no, new crossroads on Old London Road.
No, you've lost me. Sorry, Councillor Garnett.
The link road that comes from the 414 through
Yeah.
the enterprise zone, and then if you go straight across, it goes into your sites.
Yes.
Okay, it's where the co-op is. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
that's the district centre. Yes.
I'm trying to. Is there any plans for a crossing across that road for the children? I'm sure we talked about it, and I'm sorry if it's not part of this application, but it's the only time I can get hold of you, Elizabeth.
Oh, you can always pick up the phone, Councillor Garnett,
Yeah.
and I'll answer any questions. But no, as it stands, as I understand it, there isn't a crossing proposed there, but obviously that's going through with the County Council under the Highways Act at the moment, so that's all being finalised with them. So that's the London Road scheme. That came forward as a separate standalone application in 2017, and it sort of moved on from planning, I'm afraid, out of my realms into the
I'll
Highways
deal with that
Department.
separately then. Yeah, sorry.
To clarify, it's got nothing to do with this application. No. Okay. Any other questions, members? No? Debate? Councillor Clark.
Well, my main concern, which I mentioned every time, is the small amount of affordable housing, 17 out of 109. And I just wonder when the full amount is going to take place. And if we're getting near the end of the development, then are we going to see the full 30% as they should provide? And or are we going to be limited by this 50%? Only a maximum of 50%, which might not actually cover the full amount of affordable housing, and that's what really concerns me.
I mean, I share your concerns, Councillor Clark, but that was decided at the outline planning phase,
Do that.
and
Yeah.
is not part of our thoughts for this, because this is just, unfortunately, the 15%, with viability and all of that argument, which we're all well aware of, has been decided already. And clearly it's less than the council would have liked, but it is what has been agreed. Any other questions, members, or debate?
Could I just ask one other thing?
Yep.
Sorry. If the officers think that the protection of trees, and I see there is green spaces, this is two of the objections, one concerning the green spaces, but there does seem to be surrounded by green space, if not within the development itself. But I think there's an assumption that the condition can cover that. Is it strong enough?
I think that's a subjective question. I mean, I don't think we can ask officers to comment on whether condition they've put is strong enough. I mean, I think that's a view you would need to take, Councillor. Councillor Garnett. You're muted, Councillor Garnett.
I'm just unmuted. Yeah, sorry. It was probably as I got tied up in my unconnected discussion with Elizabeth. On page 11 of the report, in paragraph, it talks about it is not considered that the proposed layout gives rise to concerns with regard to unreasonable harm to the amenities of future occupiers. In view of the higher density of the scheme and in the interest of residents' amenity, general permitted developments such as insertion of additional windows and other alterations or enlargement should be controlled by condition. I can't see a condition. Did you not put one in, Patricia?
I'm sorry, Councillor, the version I'm looking at doesn't have a page number. Which page are we on?
I've got page 11, which
It's above access parking and highways, isn't it?
no impact of amenity in local residents.
I'm nearly there.
Between 10 and 11.
Section.
We can insert a condition if you would like to do that.
Right.
We haven't at this stage.
Oh, so yes, so it's down to us.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think perhaps we should do, because obviously if people start adding, well, mind you, that'll be covered by the new plan, by any planning application, won't they? So I don't think there's any need for a condition here. Do you think? Am I right?
Sorry, Chair, through you. The permitted development allowances don't allow you to have unobscured windows at first floor level now. It would only be if you feel that windows which have already been inserted shouldn't be clear glazed, that you could perhaps place a control.
I don't think there's necessarily a requirement.
I'm weakening on this one, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's probably not necessary.
Correct.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, if we've finished the debate, if we could move to the vote, members. So we are voting on, let me find this, the recommendations which appear on pages 13 to 20 of your agenda papers. So it's recommendations 1 to 5 and informative 1. All those in favour? Okay.
I'm raising my hand too.
Yeah, I've got them all. And then I don't think there's anybody against, is there? No, in that case, that is unanimously carried. Thank you, Elizabeth, for coming. If you want to go, you're welcome to leave. And if we could move to the next item on the agenda paper, which is Land South Farm Mead, Nicholas. Nicholas?
Hello?
Yeah, do you want to present this?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, this application is for the installation of 9 parking space.
Can't hear, Chair.
Can you speak up, Nicholas?
Yes. Okay, this application is for 9 parking space on land south of Marmead, and also knee rail fence is proposed to be installed around the perimeter of an existing green. The next slide will show you the application site. Yes, the application site can be divided into 2 parts. The part to the north is an existing open green area, and the part to the south includes some trees and a strip of very narrow green area. And if we move on to the next one, we can see some photographs of the site. Yes. To your left-hand side is the green space to the north, and to your right-hand side, where you can see a van, is the narrow strip of green space to the south. And the next slide will show you the proposed layout. The application is for 9 parking space on land to the south of the road, including a disabled space, and the knee rail fence will be installed along the perimeter of the green space to the north. This whole area was being classified as an internal open space according to the local plan, which is part of the green infrastructure of Harlow. And we do have some neighbors comment on this application who wants to have more than 9 parking space because they feel like there's a need for more local parking in the area. But changes from a green open space to parking area is a significant change to the character and appearance of the area. And we feel like creating parking space to the green space to the north will run against our local plan policy on internal open space. And therefore, we considered the proposed 9 spaces to the south is an appropriate amount and would also preserve the access to green open space within the town and provide more relief visually to the otherwise very high density development area. And if we move on to the next slide, Alex. Yes, this shows you where the parking space is going to be about in the middle of the photographs. And to the left hand side, it's the parking space which will be fenced off by the rail fence. Next, Alex, please. Yes, you can see just right down the middle of this photograph, there's a footpath which provide access to the residential properties on 5 acres, and the disabled space will be to the right hand side of it, and the rest of the proposed parking space will be to the left hand side. Next one. Yes, and more photographs of the proposed parking area. We do have comments from the highway authority who concerned about the materials to be used on the parking area. The application proposed to use loose, like a gravel surfacing. This is because the parking space are so close to the trees, and we want it to be a no-dig construction to protect the health of the trees. And we think the proposed materials is appropriate, but there are concerns that loose gravel might actually overspill on the highway and affect highway safety. So we put in a condition, which is I think condition 4 of on the report, which says that there should be no loose materials within 1 meter from the curb, which is considered appropriate by the highway authority. And this is the green space to the north, and the new rail fence will prevent these informal parking, which is again, as I mentioned, considered to run against the internal open space policy of the local plan. And this one is looking from the other side of the site and towards the main highway. And yeah, I think that's it for me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Speakers. We have 2 speakers who've submitted a written statement. So if we could start with Gillian Aitken's statement.
Thank you, Chair. I am the organiser of the petition previously sent in objecting to the above application. I wish my comments to be heard at the Development Management Committee on the 2nd of September. As a resident of Farm Need who backs onto the grassed area, I object to the post and rail fence being placed around the grassed area opposite to the proposed parking spaces. The proposed spaces are clearly not for residents of Farm Need, as we would need to climb over the post and rail fence to gain access to our rear entrances. We have been respectfully parking on the grass from approximately March to November for the past 25 years and have never had a problem until parking was stopped in part of Bishop and Fine.
Hannah, we seem to have a problem with your connection.
Rely on parking on the grass of their houses for easier access to the homes. Parking is already very difficult front, and even if these 2 people
By Hannah.
Disabled parking spaces at the front, as these are larger than a normal space, this would take up the equivalent of 3 spaces, compounding the parking more, very small. Yes.
Hannah, sorry, could you email those through to another officer, because your connection's not very good, because we've not been able to hear the last minute or so.
Sorry, Chair.
Chair, I may be able to assist if you bear with me a second.
Hello, sorry.
That's okay. It's not your fault. The internet connection must have dropped out. Obviously, we want to hear those.
Was it? Were we on Gillian Atkins?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Can you hear me or-
No, we can't hear you. You've definitely got an issue with your internet. If
Shall I read out, Chair? Would that be okay?
yeah, that'd be good. If you could do them for us, that'd be appreciated.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
is from Gillian Atkins. I am the organiser of the petition previously sent in objecting to the above application. I wish my comments to be heard at the Development Management Committee on the 2nd of September 2020. As a resident of Barnmead who backs onto the grassed area, I object to the post and rail fence being placed around the grassed area opposite the proposed parking spaces. The proposed spaces are clearly not for residents of Barnmead, as we would need to climb over the post and rail fence to gain access to our rear entrances. We have been respectfully parking on the grass from approximately March to November for the past 25 plus years and never had a problem. Until parking was stopped in some parts of Bishopsfield and 5 Acres, then the HGVs, white vans and other cars appeared, with little thought for the grassed area. In removing our ability to park on the grassed area, we feel we are being penalised because of their bad behaviour, and we are now very concerned that we are now very concerned where we will be able to park. The fronts of our houses are in a square, and 2 residents who are disabled rely on parking on the grass at the back of their houses for easier access to their homes. Parking is already very difficult at the front, and even if these 2 people had disabled parking spaces at the front, as these are larger than a normal space, this would then take up the equivalent of 3 spaces, compounding the problem of parking even more in a very small area. The problem of people wishing to park is not going to go away, and by restricting the areas of previous parking, it just pushes the problem to another area. But it also makes life very difficult for disabled residents.
Thank you, Alex. Could you also read out Charlotte Yaxley's statement? If you've got that.
Charlotte Yaxley. My name is Charlotte Yaxley, and I live in Barnmead. My back gate opens out onto the land south of Barnmead, and I currently park there. I am registered disabled with a blue badge, and this is the only place I can park within easy access to my home due to the lack of parking at the front of my house. It opens into a square and is too far for me to walk. The positions of these parking bays will be too far from my gate. I will not be physically capable of climbing over the 2-foot railing as I am too unsteady on my feet, and the width of the field will be too far to walk with my current disability. I feel anxious and worried about the prospect of being housebound if this plan is to go ahead. I have previously been part of partitions.
Thank you. Councillor Mason, you wanted to comment on this as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm actually commenting on behalf of 2 of the residents in the area, Mr. Mervyn Jouliffe and Mrs. Joan Jouliffe, who are not in a position to take part this evening. They did send via myself an email on the 18th of June with concern around the hard standing for 9 parking spaces, including a disabled space. Their concern was that actually 9 spaces plus disabled is really not enough. In actual fact, the green space that Nicholas mentioned, which is part of open spaces, they have lived in that area for 50 years. It has never, ever been used as a playing field for leisure or anything else. And quite frankly, as situations have changed, families have gained more cars, Harlow wasn't built in that way, then possibly the the harder issue of looking at the open spaces should be dealt with in consultation with the residents. So the other thing is that Mr. and Mrs. Julep mentioned that the space that's going to be fenced in is actually currently used for parking. And we know that parking, whether it's 5 acres, Bishopsfield or Barnmead, all of that area, all we're doing is pushing it from one area to the other. He did request on that date in June, he did actually speak with Officer Nicholas from planning, but he did actually request that someone go to the area and speak with the local residents. I appreciate it was a time of lockdown. In actual fact, I now understand that no one took up that opportunity, and you know, COVID is probably an example of that, but he could have been contacted by phone. So overall, they are against the railing going round. They believe that parking is a priority, but this is nowhere near enough. There are currently up to about 15 to 20 cars fly parking on that green area, which will be now have railings around it. And whilst fly parking is an issue, the concern I've just heard from a previous disabled person should be taken into consideration. And maybe in the longer term, what they should be looking at is considering the purpose of that green space. Hopefully I've represented that enough for Mr. and Mrs. Julep's views to be taken into consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mason. Any questions, members? Councillor Garnett. Sorry, Councillor Garnett first. Mute or unmute yourself.
I'm unmuting me. Nicholas, has any consideration been given to take a small section of the green opposite to have a section of parking there, or is this the only scheme available?
Hello, hi. We consider applications according to the information presented in front of us. So we didn't have any update from the properties development, the properties department on providing more parking spaces. But I want to go back to the near rail fence. We do impose a condition, which is condition 2, requesting openings should be put on the near rail fence to allow foot access to those green space. People can enjoy it, and probably residents could get access to their rear garden from the back.
Just to clarify, those openings are for pedestrians to walk through, not for vehicles to gain access to the green space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Clark.
Well, I was going to raise the same question, actually, whether in fact it was possible to have a disabled parking directly taking up a little bit of the green without actually altering the entire project.
So I think it might be. I don't know whether it's possible for us to amend this application, because I think it would be a totally different application if we were to amend it in that way. Bearing in mind the housing department aren't here to comment on it.
If I may assist, Chair, that's the right test to keep in your minds. So these are always strange circumstances where the council makes an application to itself and we sit in judgment upon it. But your role this evening is to assess the planning merits of the scheme before you. It might be that there would be better schemes that could come forward and better solutions to the issues that have been raised, but they may need to be addressed outside of this process. I would advise that you're best to confine your assessment to, is the scheme in front of you acceptable or not on its own merits?
Councillor Hardware.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding what has just been said, I think considering that the green grass has been used for many years by cars. Putting up a fence will last a few months before it's taken down and cars go back onto that green. I don't think there's been a huge lack of imagination, I think, in developing this scheme. The way it's been presented is it's acceptable as it is, but it doesn't go far enough. And I'm sure that I can against it on that basis. But the one thing that does concern me is the use of loose stone. I've seen it used elsewhere. It doesn't matter what you do, it ends up everywhere else other than where it's supposed to be. So I would like to suggest that A, the material is changed, B, that if we do consent this, that we send the note back to the Housing Department to be a bit more imaginative and perhaps expand it a bit.
Councillor Holcope and then Councillor Danvers.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say what Councillor Clark was saying. There are two disabled people here that would benefit from having the parking on that green. Are there any more disabled people that would also need that facility? And should we be looking at that possibility within this application or deferring to look at it in another time? Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Danvers.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing strange about Harlow Council's Development Control Committee taking a decision put up by other departments. Other councils might just glibly give themselves planning permission, but we're not one of those authorities. And it's very important that departments actually abide by rules like anybody else in this town and bring them forward to this committee. I think personally it's back to the drawing board, Chair. This scheme seems to be poorly thought out. The south of the scheme seems to be the nice part of the scheme with the trees and so on. With the scrubland to the north, looking at the pictures, is the area that should actually be given over to parking. And given the proximity of the disabled residents in Barnmead, it clearly would actually have some merit. The other thing for 5 acres, if anybody wants extra parking in 5 acres, the authority actually has a vast area of derelict garages to the southeast of the site, which could obviously be considered there. So are we actually just planning 9 parking spaces for a free-for-all for 5 acres, Bishopsfield and the bottom of Barnmead? Or are we acknowledging the point that some of the residents have made is that they have been parking there? I don't like to see parking on green space. It makes a mess of it and so on. I can see where the officers want to fence it off. But equally, I think it's back to the drawing board, and that thin slither of the south should be discounted. And the north of the site, next to the housing in Barnmead, is the one where we could actually designate some parking places and also acknowledge the disabled problem. So I will not be supporting this scheme.
Councillor Danvers. Alex, did you want to come in?
If I may, please, Chair. So when we're looking at and I completely agree with Councillor Danvers, it's right to give full scrutiny to the application, whether it be submitted by the council or anybody else. It is also right, no matter who submits the application, that we as the local planning authority approach every situation in a positive and proactive manner, as we're required to do in planning legislation. You have before you an application, whether it's explicit in the description of development that a rail will be erected around that larger green space, therefore prohibiting car parking to it. And the tone of the debate so far this evening indicates that some councils have concerns about whether that's been properly thought through. What I suggest is, the options were the committee minded to go that way are that you could refuse the application, but that would introduce delays for the council working up what might be a more acceptable solution. The alternative is you can perhaps seek to defer the application, but to give guidance to the applicant as to what the concerns are you want them to investigate. And that will support us as officers engage with our colleagues elsewhere in the council and try to find a scheme which addresses the points you've made and anything else that you'd like us, instruct us to take into consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Holcock. Can't hear you.
I would like it to be deferred so that we can do exactly what Alex has just said, look at it again, see the disabled situation and see if the northern site is the more applicable one than the other site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I also suggest, if we're going to defer it, that there's full consultation with Councillor Mason and Councillor Edwards as the ward councillors and any county councillors that wanted to get involved in that consultation about what the appropriate scheme would look like. Councillor Hardware.
And I would agree with deferring it, so to put in the narrative about the material used as well.
Thank you. So it's been formally seconded. Does anybody else want to speak? No. In that case, could we move to a vote on deferring this for further discussions with the Housing Department? All those in favour? That appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, moving back to your agenda papers then. If I can open up the other IT. Agenda item 9, which is Great Leylands. I understand, John, you are presenting this one.
Yes. This is an application for a 2-storey side extension. It's wider than our policies would normally allow, but we think there are special circumstances justifying this. It's at the end of a cul-de-sac, so not prominent, and there is a similar house opposite. That's the application site. As you can see, it's at the end of one arm of Great Leylands. Can we have the next slide, please, Alex? This is a photograph of the similar area. You can see there's a sort of one arm of the cul-de-sac and at number 11 at the end. If you look at the S at the end of the 11 Great Leylands next to the blob, you will see the tree which is referred to in the report. Can we have the next slide, please? That's just the site plan. The proposal involves demolishing an existing garage, which is outlined in red, and the replacement parking area is towards the top left of the photo, the sort of reddy pink colour. Can we have the next slide, please? That's the existing floor plans of the house. Next slide. And that's the proposed plan there, roughly doubling the width of the house. They're also adding an extension of the porch at the front. Next slide, please. That's the existing elevations. And then the next slide shows what they're proposing. Obviously, the perhaps more important, more key issue is the side extension, but bear in mind the porch as well. We think that is it's a reasonably small extension and is acceptable. Next slide, please. And those are existing and proposed side elevations. That's the general view of the cul-de-sac arm. Sorry, I've got the road name of the road behind. You can see the houses in that. 3 or 4 people in that road have objected, but we think it's far enough away not to affect them unduly, although it seems that this plot was laid out only half developed because those houses were going to be built when the new town was laid out. But there still would be ample room behind those houses without the side extension unduly affecting them. And again, you can see, I was going to say, again, you can see the tree which I referred to. So just go back. That's the trees right behind the house. Okay, Alex, next one. That's the front view of the house. Fairly straightforward. Next one, please. That's sort of moving round so you can see the garage and other outbuildings to the side of the house. And where the dustbin is on the left, that's where the parking spaces would be. Next slide, please. And that's the house opposite, showing that they've had a 2-storey side extension of similar size.
Sorry, I was muted and trying to talk. We have a written statement from Barry Wales. Alex, could you read it out, please?
Following my written objections of the 1st of June 2020, here is a summary of the key points. Number 1, there is no garage. Every house on the estate of Great Leylands has a garage, and therefore this house should have to be in line with the whole estate. Number 2, hard standing. In section 1.3 of the application statement, it refers to an existing hard standing on the property. This does not exist, and cars do not park off-road. If there were a hard standing for parking cars, it would have to have a dropped curb, which it does not. Point 3, front extension. No house currently has a front extension apart from porches. This would make this house stand out as very different and will not be in keeping with the estate. Point 4, comparing the extension to number 10, Great Leylands. The applicant has tried to compare the extension to that at number 10. The application is for quite a different build out for these reasons. There is no garage like on the proposal, as number 10 has a built-in garage. As other houses on the estate which have built out to the side have integral garages. The proposal is not building out to the same building line of number 10. The proportions are not the same. It will look very different when you also consider the front extension. Point 5. Fencing should be replaced, as currently the owner/landlord has not replaced the fencing, and therefore the estate is open with a back door entrance. Our concerns are that if a hard standing is approved, the planning consent needs to ensure the property is fully fenced and not provide a back door for parents parking cars on the estate and taking a shortcut to Perford Green School to collect their children. The estate has the security of only a road entrance. Currently, due to the fencing not being repaired, ignoring council insistence and contact with the building owner, the estate has an unauthorised point of entry. I am concerned that if this proposal were to be passed, then how would Harlow Council ensure controls of building procedures being followed, as previous controls with regard to the applicant blatant refusal to abide by council covenants, such as repairing fencing, providing security to the state, felling trees on council property illegally, maintaining landscapes in acceptable condition, does not provide confidence to the local householders of the intent to control and maintain order. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alex. We have no speakers or no more speakers on this, members. So have you got any questions? Councillor Danvers.
Is this a family property, or are you implying that it's a landlord and it's a property that's being let?
I understand that the applicant is a landlord, but that's not really a factor you can take into account in dealing with the planning application. The proposal would be for a one-family household, so whether they're owner-occupiers or tenants isn't really material to the application, but it would be a single family.
But to clarify, it's not an HMO.
No.
Second question, sorry.
Yeah.
Could this become 2 dwellings?
If a planning application were made, we would have to consider that application in the context of the policies as applied then. They'd need a further planning application.
Councillor Souter.
Yeah, can we put conditions that the fence is repaired?
Unfortunately not. Conditions have to be relevant to what's being applied for, and that would not be relevant. I can understand your and indeed residents' concern that there's an unauthorised shortcut with security and other issues, but that's not something that can be dealt with within the context of a planning application, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and this issue was raised last time this property came before us as well, but yes, no, we can't. Any other questions, members? No? Debate then. Who wants to start? Councillor Holcoop?
Is there any way that we can put a condition on that it's a one family dwelling, even with the extension?
Can I answer that, Chair? Yes, you could put the condition preventing its subsequent change of use to a C4 use, which is up to 6 people living together for multiple occupation. You could add such a condition if you wished.
If I may just add to that, sorry, Chair. You can only impose a condition where it makes something which is unacceptable in planning terms acceptable. So if you were minded to impose such a condition as John has outlined, you'd have to explain why it was necessary and why this application could not be seen as acceptable without that condition being imposed. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Clark?
Well, I share all those reservations that have been mentioned by the objectors and other members, but this is double. I just concentrate on a couple of issues. Ultimately, it's double. The 2-storey building is double the existing one, which is against the design guide, and therefore should not, it's all right to say, well, all right, it doesn't matter on this occasion, but when do we actually agree to it? We can't pick and choose. It's against the design guide. And also the porch is double, which again is against the wishes of the design guide. So those are my 2 main reasons. Ultimately, of course, it's got a history, a long history of refusals. 6 out of 9 are objecting to it locally, and they have a number of valid reasons why. And effectively, it looks like a semi-detached building, basically, that I suppose you can argue we can stop it becoming more than used by more than 2 separate households, but I'm not sure that that's a valid way of approaching it. So I would just approach it on the grounds that it is against the design guide in particular.
Councillor Hardware, then Councillor Danvers.
Yeah, I'm really going to repeat what Councillor Clark has just said. The house across the road, which has had a similar extension, was done under the prevailing design guide at that time. Obviously, we took a lot of time and effort putting together the Harlow design guide, and it's there for a reason. It's there to guide people in determining what they put in as an application. It says quite clearly 2/3 the size. This is twice the size. It does not with that. Looking at the drawings, it does actually look like a terrace of houses, which I've probably prompted the question as to whether it can be converted subsequently into 2. So I'm minded to refuse this purely on the basis that it doesn't conform to the design guide.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers.
Well, ironically, this is probably the swan song of our committee being able to act like this. But while we've still got the power, not for much longer, but while we've still got the power, I think we should actually turn this down. And the reason I would actually give is that I've seen all of this before. I've seen it in Ty Green Village. I've seen it in Quarry Springs. It very quickly becomes a second dwelling. It sounds like the local residents have an inkling of what will actually be happening here. And if we're minded not to turn it down at this stage because of its size, then we should actually put the condition that was suggested to make it a family dwelling. And the reasons that we could give for that is simply, you could see from the slides, the very difficult parking in that particular corner and the lack of parking provision that the developer wants to make. It's clear that the developer does not live there. Otherwise, I would imagine the residents might be less unsympathetic to what's going on. The whole thing doesn't seem reasonable to me. And I think either we should turn it down or we should actually put a condition on it to actually make sure that it's a dwelling for 6 people and no more.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers. Councillor Garnett. You're still muted.
Yep, that's it. Second time lucky. Yeah, I agree with the last 3 comments. I was concerned about the allowing it to double in size when we have a distinct a design guide which says it shouldn't happen. I think once you start bending the rules or bending the design guide or whatever it is, then you're on a thin end of a wedge. And I'm concerned where this is going to end up here. The gentleman himself won't be living there. He owns a number of properties, but that's besides the point. So I think if the design against the design code is strong enough, then I will object to it on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I also suggest that, as the residents suggested, the provision of garages is also a material concern in that every other house on that estate has a garage, and the proposal is not to have a garage in this house, but to have off-street parking, which again is against the character and identity of that estate.
If I may, Chair, I think there's a defensible case on this size of the extension. I don't think there will be a defensible case if you use that as for a reason of refusal. He could demolish his garage tomorrow and there'd be a house without a garage. I don't think that reason for refusal will stand up, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Jane. Right, so members, I think we've had a long enough debate. If we could move to the vote. So all those in favour of, sorry, is anybody looking to suggest any amendments? Or are we just moving to the vote? No? Okay, let's move to the vote then. All those in favour of recommendations 1 to 6 and informatives 1 and 2, which appear on pages 40 and 41. There are none in favour. All those against? So that is unanimously refused. Could somebody outline the reasons for refusal? Councillor Garnett, did you want to do that? You'll need to unmute yourself, Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, I am. You're quicker than I am. But, yeah, it's contrary to our design guide, which we have adopted, and we should be sticking to that. I'd agree with John. We talk about garages. We know there's going to be problems with parking there, but we can't formulate that into a reason for refusal. So I think we'll stick with the design guide and throw our weight behind that as much as we can, unless somebody else has got some other options.
Chair, if I can maybe add some advice at this stage, what we need to identify and the reason for refusal is the harm which is generated by the fact that the proposed extension does not accord with the design guide. So if we go back to the spirit of what the design guide is seeking to achieve, it talks about side extensions being, I've lost my page. What we want to see is the side extension being subservient to the dwelling to which it attaches. So something which is 2/3 the width of the main dwelling remains subservient to it. It's not extending it by the full 100%. So I think what you may think about is the size of this extension something which would unduly overwhelm the existing house? one of the comments made in the debate was about the terracing effect that this might have. So if you perhaps want to think about going one step beyond saying it doesn't accord a design guide, and then perhaps saying what the harm is that it creates in terms of what it looks like and how it would look in the character of this area, that would help us pull together the reason for refusal on your behalf.
Sorry, Chair, could we, is that out of character with the area?
Out of character with the area.
But basically looks like the terrace as a semi-detached.
Overdevelopment.
Yeah, because it's, you know, we all know that if it's 4 bedrooms, there's going to be 2 or 3 cars there, which is going to cause problems.
At least.
That's within the permitted parking regulations. So.
Yeah.
Yes. So what we're effectively saying is that because of the mass of it, it will no longer be subservient to the original building, and will bring harm as far as the rest of the estate's concerned.
Yeah.
Yep.
Character. What is character? Is character B1? Is it? I've got my
out of proportion with the rest.
B1 or something.
Is it B1 out of character?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got the design guide.
If I can come back to you then, perhaps, councillors, what we have is that the extension is disproportionate in size. It fails to be subservient to the existing property, creating the appearance of a terrace which is out of character of the local area. So that's the
Yeah.
Okay, members, moving on to item 10, which is 97 to 126, the Hydes. John, I think you're presenting this one as well.
Can we have the next slide, please, Alex? Can we have the next slide? This is a site plan. It's the site is a 3-storey, roughly L-shaped block of flats opposite the town centre, opposite roughly Terminus House. The L-shape wraps round an area of public open space, and there's a walkway underneath the flats, which we'll see later on some of the slides. Can we have the next one, please? This is an aerial view of the site. At the moment, on the photo, you can see a tree on the open space that has now been felled. I think it was dangerous, but anyway, it's no longer there. In that respect, the photo is out of date. To the northwest, sorry, you go back. To the northwest, top left, you can see another clump of trees, which is the one which requires the condition regarding the arboricultural method statement. Next slide, please. This is the proposed plan showing the layout after the refurbishment takes place. Can we have the next slide, please? Rather than show elevations, we've got some visualizations which I think they show the proposal more clearly. Have the next slide, please. That's another angle. Next slide, please. I think this one, particularly the top one, shows what they're proposing. The open space within the L is divided roughly 2/3, 1/3 public open space, private open space. The idea is that the residents will have their own private area, which will have a controlled entrance gate so that the public shouldn't be able to get inside that. And then the remainder, roughly 2/3, is for public open space. Whilst you're looking at the 2 photos, notice the sort of checkerboard, for want of a better word, pattern on the end walls, which is part of the improvements in appearance, the recladding of the development. Next slide, please. This is a general view of the development where the two arms of the L meet. There's a walkway through to the car park to the north, and that's where the cycle stand is proposed. That's an issue we'll be looking at in more detail in a moment. Next slide, please. And that's another view of the estate, of the flats from the Hydes facing towards the town centre, and you can see the walkway or tunnel through. The development is in need of refurbishment. It is in poor condition. Next slide, please. That's just a general view of it, showing details of the walkways on the flats itself. Slightly confusing, there's two sorts of walkways. There's a walkway through the building, and there's a walkways in the air to get to individual flats. Next slide, please. I've highlighted three issues. I've taken detailed photos of the relevant parts of the plan so that you can understand these. These are concerns particularly raised by residents. The first is the positions of the car parking spaces next to the flats. Now, when I prepared the report, I misunderstood what the concern of the residents was. I thought it was the worry that a car would come into the parking space, not stop and collide with the walls. But you can see, if you look underneath the porch, there's a sort of bar across on the other car parking spaces, which would act as a warning that drivers were getting to the end of the parking space and should not go any further. But I gather from the comment, which will be read out in a moment, that another concern is you have got car parking space close to residents' flats. This is perhaps not ideal, but this is a blank wall. They're intended to be visitor spaces, so they're not likely to be used very much late at night. So on balance, it's considered acceptable. Next slide, please. One of the residents has expressed concern about the tree near their flat. Actually, you don't need planning permission to plant a tree, of course, but arguably creating the planting tree pit for it would require planning permission. But you'll see it's not actually affecting the windows of the flat so much. It's nearer the door and the stairwell to the flats above. And there's also concern that drug dealers and others might hide behind it. Well, it's in a controlled area where non-residents should be excluded. But anyway, it's a single tree, so it's unlikely to provide much of a screen to nefarious activities. And then the final slide, please. This is a cycle parking area in the walkway under the flats. There's concern that people using this would cause noise, but in our view, this is a good position for it. It is very central and very convenient for the flats. It will have a degree of surveillance for people walking through and also viewing from the flats opposite. Some residents have suggested that the cycle stands be put further away, but that would not be as convenient a location, so we think this is acceptable. Thank you.
We have three statements actually on this in opposition to it. So first, if we could start with Nicole Collins. Alex, if you could read it out.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have a problem with the benches being put outside, as this is a high antisocial area and will create a place for the teenagers, drug takers and dealers to sit and cause problems. I am concerned about the stability of the building, as we have a major crack inside and outside our property. Where the bike storage is being put will cause problems with number 99, as this will be against the bedroom wall. The car parking being put next to mine at 97 will cause noise, and I am concerned someone will hit the wall as it's so close. In the original meeting, we were given the whole of the field. In the original meeting, we was given the whole of the field, and now most of it is being given to outside. How come we haven't been given this in the new plans? This is giving the people who cause issues around here more space than the residents who live here. I am also concerned on how I would cope with all the works being carried out. I have severe anxiety, I suffer with awful panic attacks, and I also have borderline personality disorder. This makes me anxious about the amount of people being around the property. I also have fibromyalgia, and I need to be able to rest when I'm in pain, but the noise and the works will stop this happening. Also, as my walking isn't very great, I am worried about any trip hazards that will be outside. I've had a call from a doctor, my medications had to be put up and I can't sleep. I'm suffering bad panic attacks and anxiety.
Thank you. If you could read out Georgina Williams next, please.
I live in the property in the middle of the L shape, and I feel like the bike racks that are going to cause a lot of noise for me and my facing neighbours on the other side of the L. I propose they get moved further away from the building, as you literally want to put them next to my bedroom wall. I'm a disabled woman who struggles to sleep and rest, and this is going to cause a lot of noise and disruption, which is going to affect my mental and physical health extremely negatively. Also, in the original meeting, we were given the whole field out back, and now we barely have a third of it. There won't be enough room for multiple kids who aren't in each other's bubbles to play. Dog walkers and kids will be against the ground floor properties, bedrooms and living room windows, and we already have enough problems with privacy in the properties attached to the field. Please extend the gates out and propose an idea to separate our windows from the remaining grass, whether it's small bushes, a little flower bed, or small fencing. I don't know, but anything you can think of, I'll be happy to have, so I don't have people up against my windows day and night. The picnic area you are doing outside the gated area is going to cause a lot of antisocial behaviour, as we have a huge problem with druggies and alcoholics hanging around anyway. This is going to massively encourage that further, and it's not fair to residents. Also, the gates, you are going to be able to open them from your intercom for people picking you up for shopping delivery. I think you should also make a couple of the spaces inside the gated car park disabled blue badge parking for residents and visiting carers, as we have a lot of disabled residents here that have carers bringing meds and treatment. There is also a slight worry about the noise levels and the safety of being inside the building whilst the works are going on, because of the huge cracks that have appeared inside and outside in a matter of months, and the residents would like to know what would happen if the integrity of the building becomes compromised. Can you also provide a dog waste bin, as we have had lots of problems with feces left on the field, and a dog bin would help with that, as there is a lot of dogs in this block. Sorry for moaning, I'm absolutely thrilled you're doing the block up, and the pictures of the building look amazing. It's just these small things I feel would be a huge improvement to the standard of living for the ground floor properties. And I have one more for Evangeline Hughes.
Yes, please.
I am one of the residents from 100 The Hides. I don't agree with the bike racks being placed outside 99's wall, as the noise will be disturbing to the children and residents that live in the centre of the L. These should be moved further away from the building. I also think we need more space on the field behind the gates, as there isn't a lot of space for the kids to play and people to walk their dogs. There's a lot of poo left on the field, so a dog waste bin would be a good idea. There needs to be some privacy for the ground floor residents attached to the field, as there's a huge problem with people against their windows, and this could be easily stopped with some sort of barrier. I think allowing people to park up against the end of the block is going to cause a lot of extra noise for residents at the end, and this isn't fair. A lot of the residents are disabled or need carers, so a special parking spot to allow that would be really handy. The picnic areas outside the gates are going to cause nothing but alcoholics and drug users to hang around there, and we already have a big enough problem with that as it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions, members?
Sorry, yeah, sorry. Me? Can I?
Okay.
Did you say me, Chair?
I said Councillor Holcoop.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Maggie?
Yeah, right. You can hear me, can you?
Yeah.
Two questions. Obviously, is in major issue, larger section for public area, and the smaller section behind the fencing for the residents. I would have hoped that the landscape and the green area for the residents is bigger, and the one for the public is smaller, because obviously there's a problem there anyway. And I think it shouldn't be closed in when the public area is a bigger size. First question, disabled parking. The agent has said they're fine if that if disabled bays going in, one already there and one being added in, and I wondered why they aren't going to put extra disabled bays in now when they've got the opportunity when they're regenerating that whole site. Thank you. I hope you got all that.
You get all those questions, John?
I didn't. I've got the gist. I'm not sure if I heard everything correctly, so if I've missed something, come back to me. The area given over to, for want of a better phrase, private v public, when the planning department received the pre-application advice, the proposal was to make all that square for private for the residents, but this would be contrary to the policy in the local plan which protects public open space, and therefore we recommend to make that area smaller. There clearly is a need for some protection for residents so that they've got a private area so people can't come right up to the windows, and therefore that's why it's laid out that way. If members feel it should be otherwise, I would recommend that you defer the application so that that could be considered. The other issue regarding disabled parking, as the scheme was submitted, it just provided one space, and I discussed it with the agent. Her reply was that if additional disabled bays were needed within the reserved parking area, because a disabled resident moves in or whatever, they could provide it at the time. They didn't want to give over bays, more bays that might be immediately needed for disabled spaces, and therefore have less ordinary spaces. But they have added an additional bay in the visitors area so that a disabled visitor, or indeed a friend or somebody coming to pick up a disabled person has got room to park and accommodate a wheelchair, etc.
Any other questions, members?
Yeah.
Yes, Mike.
I can't hear him.
Yeah, still muted, Mike.
You're on mute, Mike. Right, okay, fine. Sorry.
Keep pressing. Sometimes it's clear.
I've been in communication with all of the residents that have made representations, Chair, and I agree with them. In the beginning, they were actually offered the whole of that square, and the public consultation meeting at the Civic Centre, that was actually explained to them. For a planning officer to actually knock that back is not right. Given the problems of that area, it's exactly as the residents have actually described it, and therefore they should be entitled to actually own that particular square. It is unusual. It certainly could not be described for people to actually have picnics there. That is absolutely ridiculous. It's a walk through from the town centre, and it causes a lot of problems for the residents. I would not like to see this scheme knocked back though, however, because the main scheme itself, the thrust of it, is so important. The fabric of some of those buildings, as they've described, I'm not quite sure of the structural integrity of it myself. I've seen the cracks in the walls, but nevertheless, I think we should go ahead with this. We should actually amend it to actually make sure that the whole square is given over to the residents, so that we do not have what we try and mitigate against the problems of the drug dealers. There is no question. The residents aren't exaggerating. It's been a problem since the 1990s, when the old general manager Dermot Byrne had to try and deal with it, and deal with it to a certain extent successfully. This is not really just a cosmetic job. This is a fundamental change of one of the most appalling schemes that appears in the area. It just has not aged well. It looks absolutely awful. Residents need to actually be able to have a pride of where they're living. And then the minor issues of the parking, we should actually respect what the residents are actually asking for. If there is that fear of those 4 parking spaces, they should be taken out. If there's a dog bin that can be put in, if that needs to be part of a planning permission, but I would have thought that could actually just be done separately anyway, and officers and I can make representations about that. So the main thrust is, to summarise, I think we should actually vote for this scheme personally, but I think we should take into account the genuine fears of the residents, and I think we should discount what the planning officer has told the housing department and give over that whole square to the residents so that they actually have the privacy. If you actually go into those flats, they have no gardens, they have no open space otherwise. It was a mistake by the Development Corporation, and that should be readdressed by acknowledging that those residents should at least have that access to that open space alone, and not what they have to put up with at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers. I don't think there's a question in there. Councillor Garnett, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did. Maybe a few years back, the police used to get involved in where there's high crime figures. Have the police been contacted on this as to any suggestions to design out crime, I think it was called, or is that gone by the board now?
No, it continues to be a problem, and it has engaged the police there, and it will engage the police, and because of its proximity to the town centre, it's the problem. The Hyde is probably one of the most difficult areas in that regard in Harlow, and it needs some respect, and the council obviously has put up quite a reasonable scheme, in my opinion, as best as it could do.
Anyway, Jane and Councillor Garnett, planning officers wouldn't know what schemes have been raised with police. I don't think that's a question we can ask planning officers. But yes, I mean, as Councillor Danvers has described, yeah, we have engaged the police. And I'm sure that Terminus House hasn't dealt with the issue either in recent years, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight, really. But it is obviously an issue that's central to to the residents. So look, I think we're done with questions. Has anybody else got debate? Or Councillor Suter, have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little bit concerned regarding what two of the residents said about cracks in their walls. I presume that they will be repaired before to regenerate.
I'd assume so, but again, that wouldn't come under the application. It would come under building control when they go to put it in the whatever they're doing on the scheme. But you know, absolutely, if there is defects in the building, they'll need to be remedied as part of the construction phase. But yes, you're right to flag it, and I think it's important that residents understand what the process is. But that'll be covered by building control as we start to build this out. Councillor Garnett, got a question? Put your hand up.
Gone past questions, haven't we?
Yeah.
Question, and then suddenly Mike was talking.
With questions, I'm happy to move to debate.
Yep. No, this was really a debate, and I was trying to agree with Mike Danvers about the square, and you know, it's all very well saying it should have an open square for public, but this is actually a residential area, you know, an L-shaped block. I don't know it well, but I've been there, and it needs what's going to happen. Desperately needs what's going to happen, because it is it's almost a blot on the landscape, and it's so close to the town centre. But yeah, I agree. Perhaps if we should try and get the public away from that area. So if it means putting more fences up, that's great. Let's put more fences up.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Yes, I just want to agree. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. The flats desperately need doing. They've been there for donkey's years, as I know, as I lived in one of them. And I agree on the public space and the private space, as it's called in this case. We need to take into account the residents' views. We have taken into account the residents' views in relationship to the benches, but we should go the whole hog and also support the private space for the residents.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holcombe.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree. I mean, I've seen that flat block for absolute years, and it is really an eyesore, and you can really tell that from both sides, whether you're Felicia Avenue or on the Hyde side, that it's way past its sell-by date. And so I'm so glad that now something is going to be done. But I totally agree that the public grassland at the front should not be theirs. It should be the residents, because they put up with too much for too long, and they deserve that space. It's not that big when you really see it, but it's big enough that they could take ownership of it and have it for themselves, which they really do deserve. So I support the application, but I do want that grassed area turned into residence area rather than because it's right by the side of the walkway, the underpass, so they're faced with it on all sides, so yeah.
Councillor Danvers and Councillor Livings.
I'd like to move, therefore, Chair, that we actually adopt the scheme, but we make the whole of the square. We make the whole of the square private to the dwellings, and we remove the cycle racks, and we designate at least 2 of the 4 parking spaces that are up against the wall as disabled parking spaces.
Is that seconded? Yep. Right,
Can I get some advice, please, Chair, before you vote on that?
Sorry. Can I just bring in Councillor Livings first, and I'll bring you in afterwards?
Yes. Well, before Mike Danvers spoke, I'd agreed with everything that had been said. As the flats have been up for such a long time, it'd be wonderful to see them enlightened and bright and livable in, and people happy to be living there. And I agree with the grounds that it definitely needs to have those fences moved back and give them much more space for themselves, a private area. Okay. Yeah, so I will be supporting that.
So my only concern is the practicalities of getting what members want agreed tonight. So can I bring in Alex, because I assume you're going to give some advice.
So if I can refer members to the description of development, which is set out on page 44 of your agenda paper, you'll see that it basically includes everything. It's a great big long description of development with lots of different elements of this overall scheme. It's very clear to me, listening to your debate, that there is a general view that something must happen very quickly in terms of securing improvements to this block, and there seems to be a lot of positivity about the overwhelming elements of the application, with the exception of the positioning of the fence around the green space and the proportion of green space which is being fenced off. And there's also been some debate about the car parking and about the cycle parking. You have several options before you, but what I'd like to propose is you consider disaggregating the elements of the application. What you could do is you could resolve this evening to grant delegated powers to your officers to grant the application, subject to us securing agreement from the applicant to withdraw from the description development the green area to the front, and perhaps the cycle parking if that's a concern, and perhaps the other parking area if that's a concern. The benefit of that approach is it allows us to get a planning consent granted for the bulk of the works which you want to have happening quickly as possible. And rather than us seeking to try and design on the hoof where the fence should go for the green space, what should happen in front of the windows for the blocks, that can come forward as a separate application with public consultation on what's being suggested, and therefore you can make sure that the public are aware of what's going to be suggested for those green spaces and that they're happy with it. So that's a way you can make a decision on the bulk of the application this evening. We as officers would then enact that decision subject to the applicant withdrawing the elements of concern, and then a separate application will come forward in the future with more public consultation on those elements of concern so that they're done with public approval. Thank you, Chair.
Danvers. Councillor Danvers.
Thank you. All I'd say on that is the original public consultation by the housing department was for that whole square to be made over to the residents. And what I gathered from the planning officer who presented this was that he said that the planning department knocked the housing department back and actually made them give over some of the green as public space. So I think the problem lies with the planning department, not with the housing department. But at the end of the day, I go along with all the things that Alex has said if that speeds things up. And we just need to give the officers delegated powers to obviously honour what I think has been a consensus amongst the councillors here tonight.
I mean, I think I'd agree with you, Councillor Danvers, in that, you know, the vast majority of this work we all want to get going as quickly as possible. The other details, I think we do need some detail behind them before they can be approved. So could I move, sorry, Councillor Garnett, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to ask, can we have the informative clause for the working hours, please?
Are you moving it?
I'm moving that one, yeah.
Would somebody
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. So could I move that we move to vote to accept the substantive part of the development apart from the details relating to the parking spaces, the cycle rack and the public space, which we're looking to how that should be designated. So all those in favour of that? That appears to be unanimous. Yep. So that's agreed, and those outstanding pieces will come back before us once they've been revised.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need a vote on the informative clause, or is that going in?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we did. Apologies. I've jumped the gun. All those in favour of the informative? That is agreed. And can you just confirm that you're still happy with the substantial?
Yeah.
It's agreed unanimously. Thank
Yes,
you very much.
absolutely.
Apologies for the confusion. Okay, so we are done. So references from other committees, there are none. Matters of urgent business, there are none. I therefore close this meeting at 9:15, and I'll see you all in a couple of weeks' time for another one.
Oh, well done.
Thank you.
On the go all the time.
Bye.
I need to go on holiday.
Have we finished?
Yeah.